Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar today. My name is Kelly Sendek, and I am a marketing manager for Unique Venues, and I'm also the moderator for this webinar. I'm joined by Kevin Tanner. He is the executive director at Dalhousie Arts Centre at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and he will be our presenter for today's session. Some housekeeping notes before we get started. This session is being recorded and I'll be sending it out to everyone later this afternoon who's registered for the webinar. Also, if you have questions as we go along, go ahead and put them in the chat and we will answer those at the end of this presentation. The topic for this webinar is how to plan an event like an artist. And with that, I will hand it over to Kevin so he can kick off this presentation.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone very much for being here. I'm humbled that so many of you are interested in this topic today. Big shout out. I got to peruse the list of people who are attending today very quickly. I want to shout out to ATCO Blue Flame Kitchen of Calgary. So many of you are attending and you stole one of the best people from one of the venues, John Wilson, shout out to him, that I'm going to be mentioning that I worked at previously. I see there are folks from a zoo, which is really exciting. I see there are folks from several arts organizations, which is really intimidating to me. And I appreciate that you will help me really challenge my imposter syndrome head on today. But really, I just want to welcome you all and thank you very sincerely. I lost my voice on Tuesday, so I'm doing everything I can to maintain my voice throughout this entire presentation. So let's all keep that in mind, and I appreciate your patience with that as well. And let's dive in. Yeah, so you're all thinking to yourself, wow, what a pretentious photo to open this presentation with. And I'm thinking the same thing. This is sort of a requirement when you become an arts leader that you have to have a photo like this in your theater. And I chose it very deliberately because I needed a reminder to ground this conversation or start it in from a framing of some of the pretense that comes with arts and artistry, especially as we grow up. We become sort of conditioned that the arts aren't for us anymore, or being an artist or the play of being an artist isn't something that's for us anymore. It's for artists and arts people. But that is baloney. The only prerequisites that you have to be an artist are passion and creativity. And undoubtedly, you all have that inside of you. So you've met the prerequisite to be an artist, to plan an event like an artist, like the title of this presentation. So I thought I'd begin by framing up my humble background as an artist, which begins in community theater. I was in a community theater production of Grease that you see here, which was in an arena. So it's my only claim to being an actor in an arena level show. It's just that it was the Russell Arena in Russell, Ontario. Not really like a known venue, still an arena show. And I was in a production of Guys and Dolls, two very known musicals. And I went to school wanting to be an actor. I went to Queen's University for drama, where I did a whole bunch of stuff except acting. Like I was a lighting designer. Lighting design is really my passion as an artistic craft. Sweeney Todd here in a Canadian play called Counter Service and the Lives of Great Waitresses. I was a set designer and did scenic design. This is a production by a Canadian artist called Christopher Morris. It's called Dust. This was a fun one because I set the stage not only on an 8-degree angle, so the actors had to perform the entire time trying not to fall down the stage, but we also put 10 inches of real sand. Why not? The stage could evolve every night and change. And so that was a really interesting, challenging show to work on in a unique venue and a unique environment. I've also been a director, and until I was really looking at this photo, I never realized that I'm actually in this photo directing. This is a production of Spring Awakening that I did when I was still an undergrad. And right at the end of my university experience, I did act one more time here alongside star of Canadian theaters, Stratford, Beck Lloyd, who I think in the first photo I'm asking, do you think I could ever be a professional actor? And she's giving me the answer, I think, in the second. Uh, so that banishes me to a life behind the scenes, which I was very happy about. I worked professionally in some really cool, unique venues. Um, and so I'll review some of those now, give you a bit of background on me. Um, I started out at Canada's Dockside Theatre, the Thousand Islands Playhouse, where I was the technical director. And what a technical director does is you bring the shows together. You are the bridge between the artistic visions and the practical execution. So we have all the designers coming together doing that work that I mentioned I did a lot of in university. Um, Figuring out how you translate that into being able to actually produce that on stage. So I did that at the Thousand Islands Playhouse. Then I moved to the Kingston Grand Theatre, which is more of a roadhouse, a lot of traveling shows going through there. And then I came to a real jewel of a venue, the Isabel Bader Centre at Queen's University, which is a fantastic new construction, world-class architecture by Snowhetta, multi-venue, multidisciplinary space with the unreal acoustics of this concert hall, which were designed by Arup, very famous for a venue in Sydney, big opera house with a lot of cool domes. They did that one, and they did this one as well. Um, Also in this venue, a beautiful rehearsal hall that looks out onto Lake Ontario, which also is used as a performance space. It's also used as a wedding space, a multi activity space, and this lobby space, which again, beautiful views of not only Lake Ontario, but a historic distillery on the side that is now a community arts hub. So it's become this sort of arts and culture campus that hosts phenomenal events, of course, really beautiful and exciting weddings. Um, and we in the arts love meetings and conferences and events like weddings, even though sometimes I'm sure you've had friction. You may have had friction if you work in art spaces, anyways, around events like this, tying up resources. But this is really what allows us to do cool and exciting art. And so after I was at the Isabel Bader Center, I saw no better example than that, than I completing my Master's of Arts Leadership and getting a job as the managing director of production, leading production operations across a whole variety of artistic disciplines at Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity in beautiful Banff, Alberta. And Banff Centre is located on this 43-acre campus here with all these fantastic buildings hosting conferences, weddings, meetings, conventions, as well as gatherings of academics and gatherings of artists in spaces like the theater. There is various dance studios, music spaces, music huts. And so across this campus, we're inundated by a whole ton of event activity from across arts and gatherings. Um, and so, like I mentioned, fantastic world-class music programming, really incredible arts development programs for visual artists. This is in the Kiln area of the visual arts program. Um, the Walter Phillips Gallery, a really, truly world-class art gallery. We did major opera productions, and I was actually a work study there in my third year, and this Canadian production of the story of Lillian Alling, and I was a projection design work study of this show. Um, the world-renowned Banff International String Quartet Competition is one of those assets that we have through that organization, as well as the world-renowned Banff Mountain Film Festival and World Tour. And that is all housed, of course, in our beautiful Jenny Bellsberg Auditorium, which was my pandemic project. And like I mentioned, the place also has, I didn't mention, one of the most stunning outdoor amphitheaters in the world, certainly in Canada, the Shaw Amphitheater. And the place convenes. There are meetings that happen there in really exciting spaces. where they make it as challenging as possible for people to concentrate with views in the meeting rooms like that. So for a couple different reasons, not least of which being that COVID entered the party, I decided to take a step back from that place. This was actually an ad campaign in Alberta, which was a really disturbing COVID coming to the party ad. But I decided to take a step back from that environment, and my wife always wanted to live by the ocean. So the opportunity came up to come to Dalhousie and lead a business transformation project, stepping sort of out of the production niche into more of general artistic leadership and redefine what Dalhousie Arts Centre is and how we serve the community through arts and culture, serving the university as well as a civic leader. So I wanted to go through all those spaces, give you a sense of my artistic background to kind of highlight something that I think is really key to this conversation, which is that all of these places I worked at were all arts places. All of them did a lot of different art through different disciplines of art. All of them did a lot of different events that were not necessarily artistic events. I worked on all of it, and none of it was really that different. Fundamentally, at its core, let's take two different events, for example, two that I've worked on that are both really significant. Opera versus funeral. Both of these events are high scale, high stakes. There's a significance to them. They're both very important. And yet fundamentally at their core, there's something about them that is not so different. What we are intending to do in both of these events is deliver on a sense of feeling for people. And to get to there, both of these events, no matter what event we're running, beg a question that we need to ask ourselves, which is a question that we're taught, two questions really, in first year theater. Why here? Why now? What is the point of what we're doing? Why is this relevant? And why is it necessary for us to do that? And for both operas and funerals, for art gallery exhibitions, for weddings, these questions are really applicable about why are we doing this here at this location and in this time? What's the relevance of that? And a big part of what we're doing in any event, even in meetings and conventions, is looking to get people to feel something, to take something away with them. And there is a path to be able to manufacture feelings, something that we know very, very well in the arts. And when we do events through the arts, we bring this forward. And that is to use a mechanism that's the basis of this entire talk, really, which is story. Story is really a tool that we can use to get to the point of delivering on that feeling, to be able to manufacture feeling with a sense of structure and a sense of purpose, and to really be able to ground ourselves in why here, why now? What is the story that we want to tell? I'm going to just take a sip of Neocitrin for a second while you contemplate that question. So at Dalhousie Arts Centre, very generally, when we're thinking about why here, why now, what's the story we want to tell, what's a relevant story we want to tell, and what are the feelings that we want to deliver when you attend any event here, very generally and overarchingly, the story looks something like this. We have great art at the top, great performances, but it could be anything. It could be a great event. It could be a great wedding. It could be a great talk. It could be a great meeting. It could be a great convention. We want people through that to feel that they're welcome here, to have great interactions with people when they're here, to great interactions with our team, and feel a sense of connection with the people that they feel here and feel a sense of connection to the place and the venue. And if we do that right, hopefully they'll think about upcoming events and return and create a cycle through this. We really want Dalhousie Arts Centre to be known as a place of exceptional hospitality and amazing experiences. And to do that, we've started to frame out this story and define it with a guest experience standard. Go into a little bit of detail on what that has entailed for us. Part one is a sort of a philosophy behind the business model and how we create amazing, memorable experiences. Part two speaks to accessible hospitality, how we consider and support people, and how that really serves everybody to make things accessible and to lead with asking, how can we help you? How may I help you? And part three, helping to make sure that we keep people safe. And this is really just a written document. I'm going to focus on what we talk about in part one today. But to one, make sure that we have it documented, make sure that we have it written down. But two, to really be able to make sure that we're giving clear direction and so that our staff understand the why behind the importance of things like creating these memorable experiences and the how and the why here and the why now. I didn't mean to make a rhyme, but that's art, baby. So a couple books that I really like are going to be referenced in this. One is Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. Founder of 11 Madison Park, Michelin-starred restaurant in New York City. And this is an important quote for how we think about hospitality here at Dalhousie Arts Centre. So we're not really trying to create luxury here because we're in a limited resource environment. I think every arts organization, but probably every events organization really is in a limited resource environment. So it's not necessarily that we want to produce luxury for our guests. So there are aspects that will feel luxurious, which are great. But hospitality means being more thoughtful and really considering how we create the experience that creates that feeling of welcoming, that creates that feeling of connection, that creates that feeling of wanting to come back, that desire to come back. And so, like I said, we're trying to build that into a story. So to build that into a story requires a bit of a structure. And the story structure that we use here to build out the story of what an event looks like when we plan it with an artistic mindset is one that I came to through a summer job that I had when I was in my summer of first year into second year university, which I can't believe it was that like groundbreaking that it stuck with me since I was like an 18-year-old kid in the Parks Canada Players, Parks Canada's traveling theater company. But I was in that. And in our first couple days, Parks Canada sat us all down and they reviewed something with us that they call the guest experience cycle. And you saw kind of a summarized version of it before, but this is the long form version. This is the story structure that we use when we plan the story of a guest experience. We take it through all the stages that Parks Canada has thankfully defined for us of what is a guest's journey through coming to our site. And it is not the experience of coming to the site alone. That is one of only a few points here. It really begins with the wishing phase, which is them starting to have the initial kernel of an idea of why am I in any way interested in coming to this event? So thinking about extending this to a different kind of event, if we think about a wedding, the initial, or whether it's, I'm thinking maybe, I was actually thinking about the guest perspective. So I'm thinking about the invitation phase. But if we're thinking about it from a venue perspective, what is it about our site that is going to make it desirable and make it something that someone wishes for their wedding, for their event, for their meeting, for their convention, for their performance to come to Dalhousie Arts Centre? How do we get that spark into their head? What are the sparkly moments of magic that we produce that do that intrinsically. Then when we think about the planning stage, we really want to think about this is from the guest perspective. So how do we make it easy for them to, in our view, buy a ticket or decide that they're going to come visit? How do we make it easy for our wedding clients to figure out how to design their dream day in our facility? What are the tools we have to be able to help identify the resources within the facility to help them be creative, foreshadowing for the arts part later? And are we making this stage of it feel welcoming, inclusive, and safe, and engaging, fun, and exciting? Does this serve that end point that we want to get to of remembering? In the traveling experience, do we have everything that we need laid out as easily as possible for them to find the venue, let alone when they get here, can they park here? Do they feel like they belong as we kind of move into the arriving phase? And very importantly for us, because this is something that I think often gets overlooked in performing arts venues, is how are we welcoming them to begin with and making them feel like they have a sense of belonging here? Because in our industry, so much of our focus is on the next phase, on that visiting phase, on what I would describe as the phase of the show, that we very often overlook those 4 phases of the visitor experience that came before, because the all important thing is the show, but it is so not. Everything that came before in this stories don't just happen at the climax. You need all of that came before and all of it that comes after. Like, how are we saying goodbye to them? And are we thanking them for having been here? So how are we servicing the guest after their meeting? Are we making sure that we had all the deliverables that they were promised? Are we providing any support so that we get to the really important stage, the kind of magic secret sauce phase of the story, which is the remembering phase? Was everything that happened in the rest of the story so special? Let's use a wedding example again, because that one's kind of tricky in some ways to think about for repeat business. But is it so special that they're naming the venue or the event planner when they're talking about it to their friends and not just the experience with their friends? So that their friend in a year's time, when they get engaged, is thinking, man, I want that. I want that magic. I want that experience. So this kind of plays into what we kind of look at as in many arts organizations as sort of the broad overarching strategy of how do you run a successful arts organization. This is the cycle that was created by Michael Kaiser and Brett Egan at the Dalhousie Institute. Basically, if you have great art and you build a strong brand of programmatic and institutional relation, you can start to build a family which builds revenue because there is a cycle of return. That's what we see, in this cycle here is a sense of the remembering stage kind of creates what they describe as that family. People that want to reinvest in what you're doing. So to that question of this session, then, what if planning an event felt less like managing logistics and more like creating a work of art? I suggest that it really comes to the remembering stage and those moments that people think back fondly on and wish they could engage with you again. If it's a conference that reappears in the world, there's a conference in the arts in Canada called Business in the Arts. And every year it cycles from Banff Centre, where I used to work, to another location in Canada. And I know there are a lot of people, myself included, who go, oh, can't wait for the next Banff year, because there is a sense of magic about it. And the location does so much of the work for that too, but the team does as well in terms of how they deliver, in terms of how the attention to detail I'm going to talk about Um, Maybe this would be a better place for that thoughtfulness slide on hospitality, because an example of that is at 11 Madison Park. If you go, and I assume this, I do not have 11 Madison Park money or clout, but what he says in the book is if you go to 11 Madison Park and you take your dinner plate and you flip it over, the logo on the bottom of where that plate was from will be facing you upright. How many people are going to go in and flip their plate upside down to see where is this plate from? Probably as many people as read that book. But that level of attention to detail is a sense of, is that extreme, unreasonable level of thoughtfulness that has moments of magic that will be noticed by few, but when it's noticed, becomes part of that special magic that makes you a memorable event producer. So that can be things like all the pens were set so perfectly on the table when we sat down at the conference. The logo was upright. The books were set perfectly. It was just so symmetrically beautiful. I really go crazy about things like that. And I remember things like that. So I assume there are others who do too. And it's worth it. Another fantastic book you can think of, and this really starts to get to that artistry point, is The Power of Moments. And this quote about elevating moments, three components to it. First, you boost the sensory appeal. Second, raise the stakes. And third, break the script. And what they mean by breaking the script is creating strategic surprise. That's moments like flipping the plate and the logos are all the right way up. Adding those moments of creativity, and it's the creativity and the bit of that passion. I should have included passion as well, but like I said, passion and creativity, I think, are those two prerequisites from being able to plan your event like an artist. And so here's an example. I had mentioned how in shows, so many of us focus on the show as the window, but maybe the best Canadian show producers in the world are the world-renowned Cirque du Soleil. Cirque du Soleil is so good at knowing how to create magic moments that break the script. And one example is this performer who is performing and engaging and interacting with the audience. This is before this show, Lucia, which is coming to Toronto this summer, if you're interested. This is before the show has begun. This is part of the pre-show engagement that breaks the script, breaks the convention of the show is going to start when the show starts. But already the magic and otherworldliness of the event has begun. Similarly, in a show that I worked in, this is a show I was the technical director and head carpenter for this was, I think, third year university. This is a production of Candide by Voltaire and Leonard Bernstein. It was obviously adapted from Voltaire. But this production broke the script because, one, it's in a very unique venue, an unconventional space. This space, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not. This has a large bulkhead around the side of the theater where there's a balcony. The orchestra is actually up here. There's audience seated underneath. And we also built audience onto the stage and in the middle. So we had audience, instead of looking onto a stage front on, the performance happened around and all involving the audience. And talk about breaking the script with creative surprises. There are 3 trap doors in this picture that I built, so I know they're there, but I defy you to find them. But there are all sorts of these magic moments that we created by thinking about boosting the sensory experience to the extreme in this production, adding elements that raise the stakes, like performers coming out from underneath here where there's audience sitting in the middle of what I lovingly called the donut of death, even though it was very, very safe. And by doing that, we broke the script and created these elevated moments for all of these audience members that were unconventional. And you can do that in regular events. At Banff Centre, again, for the Midsummer Ball, where I always took my job very, very seriously, a small example of that is this major fundraising event that we did every year, um, where the stakes were obviously raised and the sensory appeal we tried to boost as much as possible. But the little magic of moment, I would argue here, doesn't have to be terribly grandiose all the time. I think that the gobo wash that you see, the lighting pattern that you see kind of throughout the room here is unconventional enough and offers this kind of sprinkling of otherworldliness that you are not necessarily expecting to have at your dinner event. It really took the sensory level to that kind of creative space and started to design it differently. Another example of that from Banff Center at the Banff Mountain Film Festival is the snow show, where my team every year makes it snow in the auditorium and creates this moment that is, unless you go every year, unexpected and so exciting and so memorable and so magical. And so, one thing that I offer in all of this is another quote from another book, Disney, and their Be Our Guest book, Perfecting the Art of Customer Service. When they talk about, they describe as setting, the environment that they work in, is everything speaks. And I think that is something I wanted to mention in that, in how we consider the environment in the sort of magical moments, the moments of creativity that we interject, and going for it. For example, in my venue right now, I'm trying my darndest in the construct of a university environment to change my garbage cans. Sounds easy, but there are certain custodial ramifications in terms of how they work with the garbage cans versus other garbage cans on campus. It should be really easy, but it's a little bit tricky. But we have to elevate the garbage in here because everything in the venue speaks, and the story we're trying to tell is not the same as the story in the classrooms on campus. An example of this from Disney is their creation of a paint color called Go Away Green that they designed to make all sorts of infrastructure in their park vanish through like pseudo camouflage. You're seeing pictures of things that are speakers and lights that are displayed in Go Away Green, but I've been to a Disney park in the past, and before I really knew about this color and would have gone looking for it, I don't really remember these things. So I think it kind of works. So another term that we use a lot in the arts is enabling constraints. And this kind of gets to the point of working with venues collaboratively. Enabling constraints is a concept that is now used heavily in the IT world, in sort of the tech world. It relates to putting constraints on yourself, like a time crunch. We want to be able to develop this app, so we're going to arbitrarily, artificially say we have to finish it by this time. That's an enabling constraint. Another enabling constraint example is all these shows on various networks where you have to use your leftovers to make a gourmet meal. There are many examples of it. I love them all. I think it's a cool thing to do. I tried doing it at my house once. It was not gourmet, but it inspired creativity. And that's something that I think are an opportunity for collaboration with your venue partners. Is we look at something like this. This was a commission in our art gallery by Nova Scotia artist, Mi'kmaq artist, Alan Sillyboy, The Journey So Far. And this was a purpose-built mural for that show. It was beautiful. It lasted for 6 weeks before it was painted over and never to be seen again. Very theater that we would make something like this temporary. But you can see that there's a collaboration between this artistic piece and the architectural constraints, the enabling constraints, the constraints that have enabled the creativity of this piece to make it into what it is, into the dynamic piece that you see here with how beautiful, I believe it's a serpent. Let's call it a serpent because that will apply to all sorts of manner of creatures. As it weaves around this built part of the architecture, as this border bridges around and frames this other part of the exhibition, the other part of the event. these are opportunities where, and I have found this as a venue operator myself, the team always wants to be creative too. It's fun to be creative. It's fun to engage in events. So as a planner, I would encourage as an event operator, and I'm sure many others would, for you to come to our teams and test out ideas and look for opportunities for collaboration, opportunities where they can help you brainstorm these moments that can become really interesting when you embrace the constraints that are presented with you. And I kind of flew through that. The final thought I just wanted to leave you on is another quote from The Power of Moments, which is, beware of the soul-sucking force of reasonableness. This kind of connects to the book Unreasonable Hospitality in a sense. In the other part of my life, in the production part of my life, as someone who is highly involved in occupational safety and event safety, reasonableness is like our North Star. You must behave as a reasonable person would. That is true in that context. But in terms of being creative, reasonableness becomes an inhibitor to being able to, as this book describes it, climb to peaks that would be unreasonable. So, and what their example is, a speed bump is reasonable, but a peak like Mount Everest is not a reasonable peak. But which one is the amazing one to climb? Which one is the memorable one to have climbed and ascended? And so it's a call to being creative and being bold and having fun with your events and not being so bound up by reasonable that the soul is totally distraught from the event. That's the webinar, gang. I'll open it up to any questions that anyone may have or any thoughts anyone may want to share.
Very cool. Thank you, Kevin. That was such a cool presentation that you gave. I loved all the imagery. That was very engaging. Also, the book recommendations are really great. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to write them in the chat and we'll talk about them. I think we'll hang on for just a minute to see if anyone puts anything in the chat. And if not, we can end it here.
Sure. And thanks very much, everyone, for your time again. If there are no other questions, I really appreciate you coming out for this talk.
Yeah, for sure. We had someone comment and say, thank you so much. This was a very engaging session. Great ways to spark creativity and keep the goal of events front of mind. Someone else asked if this recording will be available. Yes, I'll be emailing this recording to everyone who registered later this afternoon.
Talk more about the fashion show. Sure, Stacy, because you are a arts person. I know that from looking at the list. You were one of the people whose venues intimidated me. So gladly. The fashion show image, though, I need to figure out which one was the fashion show image. Let's see. It might be that it was this one. You can tell me if I'm right or wrong. This was Cirque du Soleil, not a flat fashion show. No?
Or was
Okay.
it the one where the audience was sitting inside of right there? I think that might be it. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So this is actually not a fashion show. It's very fashion show-like. This is a production of Candide. So it's a musical that was written from a very old text by Voltaire, but reanimated by the music of Leonard Bernstein and released in the 70s. And the costume design, this was really a production that centered around storytelling as a model within the story. So the characters all kind of wore a base layer costume. You can see kind of some of it on Lauren here, that was very like petticoat and kind of neutral tone colors that they would then add accent pieces to, like the scarf here. like this jazzy number here, in order to take on various characters. Well, definitely the pink sheep, not always a character in the show, um, but a strong character choice. So, um, yeah, and this is to extend it to other events. I mean, using storytelling in the telling of a story is a very handy way to not shy away from resource gaps. So it's very expensive to do a show like this and with this many locations and this many different characters and make it look polished, polished, polished. But it's very elegant to do a show like this where it's like, we're storytelling. Now I'm this guy. Now I'm this guy. Um, it's a creative way that also involves the audience so that it creates active engagement.
Very cool.
Any more ways to? So,
Um,
question was, sorry, you ask questions and I'll answer them.
what advice do you have for creating a memorable 75th anniversary convention that resonates with college students, even when they may not notice every detail, while still maintaining an artistic and elevated experience?
Involve them is, I think, the starting point because it must come from a place of authentic relevance. Um, and you probably may already be doing that. So, that might be advice like, yeah, well, of course. But um, it really comes to mind when I think about, for example, in Canada, we have a lot of incentives in our granting right now to serve underrepresented communities. And it is absolutely something that is a responsibility of arts and culture organizations to do. And it's fundamentally a great thing to do as people. A lot of arts organizations go off the rails on this because they do it without them. And then they're like, why did no one, in Nova Scotia, for example, why did no one from the Mi'kmaq community come to see this Indigenous artist we presented and didn't ask them about or didn't involve them in the curation of at all? Because we try to impose a sense of relevance on that community. And I think it's very similar with student groups is it can be tough to find the right students to engage with to build that bridge, but the bridge needs to be centered on from a place of authentic relevance that is not authentic in your view, but it must be authentic in the view of the recipient. And so the best way to do that is to talk to them and involve them, in my view, which is, I'll totally admit, way easier said than done.
Okay, we have another question here. What's one small creative touch that tends to have the biggest impact on attendee experience?
Physically saying welcome to people is an incredibly powerful thing to do. When I can, and I encourage my other staff to do this, and we've got greeter roles on some events, but when I can, I will stand at the front doors of our venue as the executive director and welcome people to Dalhousie Arts Centre. And it's so powerful, and it is a real moment of breaking the script because it's not something people always expect when they come to a venue that they're going to be physically greeted at the door as often as I can outside, because again, it's a little moment of magic. Um, but that has this huge a moment of personalizing. Also, when we're doing one of our own shows and I can go on stage and speak to the audience beforehand and welcome them to the venue, I'll often come out at the end of the show to thank them for being there. And that's hugely beneficial too, because they've all seen me on stage. So they have the context of who I am. So then when I'm thanking them for being here and seeing them go, they have this pseudo social relationship with me from the guy on stage to now be able to feel like they can engage with me. So I'm less random. So those are two kind of examples that come to mind quickly.
Okay, we have another question here. In the age of AI, how would you recommend balancing increased focus on measurable outcomes, data, and ROI with ensuring a consistently high quality experience?
Well, it's sort of to me, like this is the philosophy behind getting the ROI piece that you want. I mean, to me, creating an environment where people remember the great time that they had at Dalhousie Arts Centre is designed to sell more tickets, which will create a higher ROI. Um, on the AI piece, what I'm optimistic about live events is that we offer something that AI will never be able to offer, which is connection between humans. Um, I mean, I don't have a lot of expertise on AI, or it's tough for me to speak to how this relates to AI. Other than that, other than just say, I think that that's our, yeah, that's our thing that it can't take from us. Um, but yeah, so on the measuring impact piece, there are ways to sort of indirectly measure it. I mean, it's tough for me to point to one thing that we're doing when we're really crafting this story, other than to say, before we started doing these things, our ticket sales were here. And now, as we do them, we're seeing them come up to this level. So it's sort of a long game piece in terms of ROI and looking at a measurable impact for that. Also, surveying our audiences and being able to get measurable scores in terms of how did that make you feel? Sometimes we like to use descriptors, sometimes we don't. So we like to, I mean, numbers are a little bit more measurable that way. Yeah, not a great answer, but that's sort of my answer.
That's okay. How would you encourage a client that is leaning toward a traditional format to take risks and consider a more creative type of event?
Um, I think, I mean, ultimately, it is the client's event, and I think what we're really trying to do in our role, that's a good question. I mean, I think having examples to bring to them of what you mean so that they can kind of be in on the magic and start to feel the fun of it and where you will go with it. Um, so in the abstract of saying we want to be creative with this event, that for many people will probably come with a sense of risk aversion because it creative and breaking the script by virtue of what that descriptor is violate the norms. And that uh, I work in a university, so we have a lot of conferencey type people here. And so I have no fear in saying that, like, I don't think I'm wrong in saying breaking the script is something that people don't love to do here. Um, but when you can help them be part of the journey of coming to that, I think that's where you can get that buy-in, like anything else, really. Um, so I'm sorry, I'm still showing this slide here. I don't really need to be. I think it's kind of helping them to understand what you mean by that. What are examples of creativity that you've thought of? Or can you ask them prompting questions of, you know, we want to engage. I'm trying to think of a live example, but like we want to be able to have guests when they arrive at our conference feel more engaged. Like, I don't know, is there something special we could do for that? What do you think? Like, maybe they say, oh, what if we handed out drinks and then you extend off that idea? Yeah, what if there was a mixer and what if this happened at the mixer? Wouldn't that be interesting and exciting and start to make people really feel like this conference is something special?
We have someone here looking for a bit of creative advice. This person says, I put on large Dancing with the Stars type venues with 200 to 400 people. Picture a dance stage in the middle with guest tables that include dinner surrounding. We struggle with the back tables getting a good view. Any ideas pop to mind on this besides a live video projected, which we do our best to do?
Good question. A good opportunity to consider the enabling constraints. Um, well, yeah, I think in my production brain, I'm going through like, okay, we would think about the layout of the room. We would think about the position of screens, and how does that, like, do we extend beyond thinking about the screens for the back of the room and integrate that into the whole design of the room? Do we shift the position of the stage maybe so we're on an angle? Does that cut down on capacity? Is that a problem? Does that unlock something artistically that's more beneficial? Because that's often where there is a conflict. And this is not to say that creativity doesn't come with conflicts. I mean, maybe I will put this image up again. You know, this changes the number of seats that you can have in this flexible space. No question about it. We had a target to reach. We reached the target, um, but the target's lower than if the stage was not this. Um, so there are sometimes compromises that come with creativity as well. And the question I think is to be asked, all right, what is the best value that we're looking for? Again, it's not really a great question, but I also think it's an opportunity to engage more people in finding the answer to that question. Engage some of the artists, engage some of the production folks if you can. Um, you would find most, so if you're in a venue like a convention center with encore staff, most of those folks, or any other, I don't mean to say one vendor specifically, but most of the folks working for those AV companies, in my experience, came from theater schools like I did. And now they work in convention centers and would love the opportunity to be creative on events. Often they do get those opportunities, but many of them are craving it. And so would love to be asked to be involved in that way, even just when you're walking through the hall.
Very cool. We have one other question here. This person says, do you have any other suggestions for creating a memorable close to the event? It seems that both attendees and exhibitors are often rushing out the door after a long day trying to avoid traffic.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I mean, put something cool at the end in the schedule is often on my list. We do a conference here where we are struggling with that same thing too. The conference I was just at in Banff, when I was talking about with business and the arts. Um, they did this really cool thing that I hadn't seen before where they had a rapporteur, and the rapporteur's job was just to be at the conference and craft a story out of the things that were being said. And that was really a memorable moment for me because I hadn't seen that before in a conference where would, this was someone with a theater background. So it was very elegant and it had a fantastic flow to it. Um, and that was a really kind of memorable, sparkly moment on a conference. Um, it's a tricky one.
Very cool. So those are the end of the questions. I think we are safe to wrap it up here. I want to thank everyone for joining and participating, and Kevin for your great presentation today. We really appreciate it and want to thank you for that.
Oh, it was really my pleasure. I appreciate you folks being here for it. Thank you.
Very cool. All right. I hope you all have a great day and thank you so much for attending this. Bye, everyone.